TikTok, time to rock. Funny videos said show has been canceled. Wrong, funny videos. It is not funny. All right. Well, I'm here with Robert Spencer, the mighty Robert Spencer. Actually, darn, I think I forgot to put the links. All right. I'll get your links in here in a minute for people who want to follow you on your website or go to your channel. Lots been going on, Robert.
Lots been going on, David.
What do you think? Has this been a good couple weeks for Islam or a bad couple weeks?
This has been the most extraordinary couple weeks that I can remember in over 20 years of doing this. This has been absolutely extraordinary. With Islamic apologists admitting that the Quran text is not perfect and without variant, with the Mohammad cartoon controversy flaring up again, and people desecrating the Quran all over the place, realizing what exactly is at stake here. It's absolutely extraordinary, and I've been enjoying every minute of it, I got to tell you.
And this has been by the way, I just put up a comment on the screen. Rick in Texas says, Robert and David, two of my favorite men. Remember Garland? I was there. So Rick says that he was there at the attempted massacre.
I myself was there.
Yep.
So it was very interesting.
Yeah, this would be kind of out of order. This would be kind of we would have spent a little more time introducing some recent events, but since Rick in Texas brought it up, why don't you go ahead and tell us about what Rick is referring to here?
Yeah, absolutely. On May 3rd, 2015, the Mohammad Art Exhibit and Cartoon Contest, sponsored by the American Freedom Defense Initiative and Jihad Watch, was held in Garland, Texas. Pamela Geller and I put it on, and we gave an award and a big check. I believe it was $12,000 to Bosch Falston, who was the winner of our cartoon contest, for his excellent cartoon that has been widely distributed since then, of Muhammad saying, "You can't draw me," and the cartoonist responding, "That's why I draw you." And of course, that's really what's going on with all this desecration of the Quran and eating the Quran and burning the Quran and who knows what else. Over the last few weeks, that people realize that when violent thugs tell us we cannot do something, then we have to do it, or we are submitting to their intimidation. And that's really why we put on the contest to start with. It was an art exhibit as well. We had prints of art of Muhammad, depicting Muhammad, some of it going back to Shiite Persia in the 16th century, and others that were made by Muslims themselves, as well as depictions of Muhammad from a time in the West when you wouldn't get killed for depicting him, depictions of Muhammad selling soap flakes and such from the 1920s. We had all sorts of interesting stuff there. But, of course, the whole thing was overwhelmed by the jihad attack on the event, which happened actually right after the event was closed. Our keynote speaker, Geert Wilders, had already left. He had to do something else that made him leave early, which is a good thing, because we were stuck in that building for hours and hours afterward while the police made sure that the area was secure and so on.
I remember watching the fallout on everyone's. I don't remember if I was watching on Facebook or Twitter, but everyone there was still posting regular updates, and basically you guys are trapped inside, and now of course we know everything that was happening outside, but back then it was just, hey, they locked us down and there's apparently something bad going on.
Yeah, we didn't really know anything. One of our security men, one of our security men came in and he said, "There's been a shooting outside. We have to get you out of here." And the event had already ended. It had just ended. As a matter of fact, Pamela had started to do an interview with Breitbart, and I was standing next to her because I was going to be next to be interviewed. And we were instead hustled out of the room, taken to a safe room which had no windows, and we were not allowed to go out of it. And so we only knew what people came in and told us. But for the most part, we were in the dark, and I was sending out tweets and so on that night, saying what has happened as I learned it. But the thing is that these guys proved our point, really. We had done the contest because in that arena in Garland, Texas, previously, right after the Charlie Hebdo massacre, which was in January 2015, remember, and our event was in May 2015. In January 2015, after the cartoonists were killed in Paris, the arena there in Garland, Texas, held not a contest. They held an event praising Mohammad and justifying the Charlie Hebdo massacre in an indirect manner, of course, but saying that what really we need to do to make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen is essentially criminalize criticism of Islam, which has always been the agenda here. And so Pamela and I were discussing this and saying, if they say this arena is open to everybody, so we should ask to put on a Mohammad art exhibit and cartoon contest. And we were sure they were going to shut us down and say, no, you can't do it.
Hey,
but they actually did allow it.
Pamela does come up with some awesome ideas.
Huh? Yeah, it was a great idea. And I still think that, people don't understand. People say to me, it's been coming up a lot lately since this sort of thing is back in the news. And they say, you play stupid games, you get stupid prizes. Why did you poke the bear? You knew this was going to happen, and you did it anyway. And I think, well, yeah, that's why we did it, genius. This is all about the reason why it had to be done. Because if we're not going to stand up and we're going to bow down and submit and say, yes, you're threatening us, then we won't do what you want. I mean, we won't do what you don't want us to do. We will conform our behavior to suit you based on your threats. Then we're only encouraging more threats and more violent intimidation. And that's not a world I want to live in, and it's not a world that I want to see the future to be like.
Yeah, and to you Muslims who are watching, and I know you're watching, this isn't about, you guys are from a different part of the world, therefore we want to harass you, blah, blah, blah. Notice people aren't doing this with most other groups in the world. You just happen to have the ideology that produces a disproportionate number of people who say they're going to go out and kill if you criticize their religion. I understand most of you are not like that. I get that. But the bottom line is, if Hindus tomorrow say, hey, you make fun of our religion, even in the West, we're going to go on a killing spree, guess what? You kind of have to do it. Guess what? Even if you had some Christians tomorrow, say, anyone makes fun of the Bible, we're going to go out on a killing spree. Well, guess what?
That's what I'm going to do.
Some people,
I'll be right there with you, David.
Some people need to do it, right? And if you're a Christian, you say, I don't want to make fun of the Bible. Well, that's fine, but don't get mad when some other groups make fun of the Bible in response to people who share your belief in the Bible. Say they're going to go out on a killing spree. Don't object, right? Yeah. So notice.
Well, David, It's a lot of Christians that I got very, very negative reactions from after Garland. And they were saying, as a Christian, you really shouldn't be mocking somebody else's religion. How would you like it if they mocked yours? And in the first place, my answer to that is always, I wouldn't care.
Yeah,
this kind of thing doesn't bother me. I don't believe that there should be any kind of restrictions in a legal sense or even in the sense of cultural conformism on blasphemy. If you want to do that, go ahead. It doesn't hurt me, and it doesn't hurt what I believe if somebody else is making fun of it. And if I were to support blasphemy laws in any way, then I would be completely inconsistent in terms of fighting all this time against a religion that coerces people and that forces people to do things on pain of draconian punishments, including even death. But also, it's very important to emphasize that this was not, as you noted, a gratuitous exercise in mocking Islam, and that the issue was not about the blasphemy itself. The issue is about the violent threats and the intimidation The issue is whether we're going to stand or whether we're going to get on our knees and say, yes, you can do what you want with us because we're scared that you'll hurt us if we don't do what you want. And that's what this is about. Because Muslims are saying they will kill, some Muslims, David, are saying that they will kill people who mock Muhammad or draw Muhammad. Thus, we have to do it. If any other religious group behaved that way, then it would be incumbent upon anybody who believes in a free society to do the same thing to the sacred objects or figures of that religion.
Yeah, and I was reading some of your articles on recent events earlier today, and you were commenting on Salman Rushdie and how he's always been viewed as kind of a hero of free speech. And so he was viewed as a hero of free speech back then, even though there were bloody riots over him mocking Islam back then. And even today, I mean, he was in a recent season of Curb Your Enthusiasm where Larry David gets a fatwa on him, and so he goes to Salman Rushdie for some advice, but it was actually fun. Salman Rushdie made it seem like it's cool to be under a fatwa because all the women want you now. So they're making it seem like it's really cool to have a fatwa because he's like, you're a dangerous man now. And so and he had the famous line. He said, "The fatwa sex is the best sex." So it's just funny that this guy's still under a death threat, but he's joking and making fun of it. So that's cool. But anyway, so how did we get from back in the day when people understand, hey, if someone's going to kill you for it, you have to stand up, to more recent years, and fortunately, I've got some statistics here that there has been a shift in opinion. But even just a few years ago, with you, and before that, with the Jyllands-Posten or Jyllands-Posten, where tons of people are just condemning them, saying, "Hey, why are you provoking the people that say they're going to murder you if you don't, follow what they want to say?" What happened in that, 15 to 20 year period?
I wish I knew. I have one explanation, but it doesn't really apply to Jyllands-Posten. The difference between Salman Rushdie on the one hand and Pamela Geller and me on the other is that Salman Rushdie was a celebrated and revered figure among the cultural left. And so the cultural left, the intelligentsia, the glitterati of the literary world, they didn't have any problem standing up for the freedom of speech when it was one of their own. But when it was somebody who's been smeared as a right-winger, then suddenly the freedom of speech was not so glamorous to support. And other than that, though, I don't really know, because Jyllands-Posten is not some right-wing newspaper. It's just a newspaper in Denmark, and most newspapers everywhere lean to the left. There seems to have been some general trend toward cowardice between 1989 and 2005, when Jyllands-Posten first published the cartoons. Although it's also worth noting that when they actually did first publish the cartoons, nothing happened. It only started in early 2007. Around Christmas time 2006, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation held a meeting in Saudi Arabia where they decided to make the cartoons a big issue. And it was only after that that the riots started everywhere. And when the riots started everywhere, then suddenly the Western press, instead of being champions of the freedom of speech, began to say, well, we have to respect Islam, and out of respect for Islam, that we will not publish these, we will not reprint any of these cartoons. The most ludicrous example of this was when Yale University held a conference about the freedom of speech and the cartoons, but didn't show any of the cartoons. It was too afraid. And this cowardice and fear in the face of this threat is exactly what the people who issued the threats wanted to bring about. And they've won the day to a tremendous degree.
Yeah, and guys, did you catch that? There's a conference on the cartoons, and wouldn't show the cartoons because
Oh, and David, they published a book on the cartoons.
without the
A whole
cartoons, right?
book about the
Yeah.
controversy without the cartoons in it.
Yeah, and here's something here's a positive note to all that, because notice if people are nice and comfortable and all of a sudden there's some terrorist attacks, they might want to back down a bit. But if you keep pushing really hard and you keep throwing violence at them, they might get to a point where they shift in the other direction. So you had a lot of jihadis realize, wait a minute, the more we attack them, the more they back down. The more they don't want to speak out. So if you look at with the South Park cartoons, right? They were going to have Mohammad in an episode of South Park, and they got threatened, and so they massively censored the episode. Well, as you pointed out, that sends a message. That sends a message. Hey, if you want to get your way, just threaten us with violence. We'll back down and we'll do whatever you want. Well, that just encourages more violence. But apparently the attacks, it wasn't just one attack. They had multiple attacks in Paris, but apparently it's now shifted people in the other direction. So according to the polling firm IFOP, this is from the New York Times, by the way. According to the IFOP polling firm, French, the such and such foundation, French think tank, 59% of respondents said that the magazine, so Charlie Hebdo, was right to publish the caricatures in the name of free speech, up from 38% in 2006. So, in other words, here we are in 2020. In 2006, 38% of people said that it's right to publish cartoons of Muhammad in the name of free speech. So, a little over a third of people in France would say that if someone's threatening, to kill you over cartoons, then you should go ahead and publish the cartoons. Now, 59% of French people say, yes, it is the right thing to do to publish these cartoons. So it's gone up over 20% since 2006. And so apparently the attacks had the opposite effect that Muslims wanted.
Even Charlie Hebdo has changed.
Yeah, they did.
Charlie Hebdo, it was very unfortunate. They had 15 of their people, including the very courageous Stéphane Charbonnier, who said, I would rather die standing up than live on my knees. They had 15 people killed in their offices in a horrific fashion. And after that, they said they were through lampooning Muhammad. They lampoon Christianity, they lampoon everything else, but they don't lampoon Muhammad. They actually announced this. And after the Garland attack, they actually condemned us for drawing Muhammad. And I thought, this is just absolutely the height of cowardly hypocrisy.
Yeah.
But now they have come around again to thinking that this is something that has to be done, because the trial just opened. This is why this is all back in the news. The trial just opened of some of the accomplices who helped the murderers in January 2015. And so to commemorate this massacre and to stand once again for the freedom of speech, they republished the cartoons again after saying they wouldn't never do it again a few years ago. So yeah, there is definitely a movement in the right direction.
Yeah, and let me get this is the cartoon section. I believe this was yesterday's paper. They're going to be reprinting. I believe they're going to be reprinting lots of their older cartoons. But I think this was either yesterday's or the day before's. I think this was yesterday's paper, where these were the cartoons from the original Jyllands-Posten paper. So this was the original, and back then Charlie Hebdo reprinted them once Jyllands-Posten was getting death threats and so on. So in the name of freedom of speech, Charlie Hebdo reprinted them back then, and so they put these back up. And so you have, I think back then, didn't they ask various cartoonists to draw Muhammad, and then they just put together,
yeah, somebody was writing a book and they wanted illustrations, and nobody would illustrate it because it was Muhammad. And so Jyllands-Posten, actually to test the commitment of the freedom of speech in the West, asked for some of the primary cartoonists of that era to draw Muhammad. And a lot of the drawings, most of the drawings, as a matter of fact, are completely uninteresting and completely innocuous. But among the drawings was the notorious one. I actually have it right up there in my office, but I won't turn the screen around. But it's Kurt Vestergaard's famous Muhammad with the bomb in his turban. And mine is signed by Vestergaard and Geert Wilders. Anyway, the bomb in the turban, that was too much.
Yeah.
And
someone has to die.
Right. It suggested Islam was violent, so somebody had to die. And of course, there have been at least one attempt on Vestergaard's life when a jihadi broke down his door with an axe and went into his apartment, but he had a safe room in his apartment where there was a metal door apparently, and the guy couldn't get into that. So he was not killed. But this has been something that has dogged him and everybody else who has been involved in this ever since. And the worst part of it really is not the jihadis whose reaction we predicted and expected. The worst part of it is Westerners who ought to know better, counseling cowardice and submission and surrender in the guise of being wise and being prudent and being careful or being respectful to Muslims.
Yeah, and so there have been a number of issues with the Muhammad cartoons over the years. So we had those, and then there was, I believe it was after South Park got threatened into heavily editing their episode of South Park that was supposed to feature Muhammad, that Molly Norris, a cartoonist, said she was going to have an everyone draw Muhammad Day. I don't know if she's out of hiding by now, but at least for years she was in hiding due to death threats. But then and then of course you had the Charlie Hebdo Massacre, and after that it became very common for people to post cartoons of Muhammad. So I noticed after the Charlie Hebdo Massacre, that's when I did see a lot of reporters posting pictures of the cartoons that had been used. And that's when you really started seeing the everybody draw Muhammad Day each year, and then thousands of people were putting out cartoons. And now it's just kind of normal to put out cartoons of Muhammad. I mean, I have cartoons of Muhammad probably 3 or 4 times a month as thumbnails in my videos, and there's no backlash, there's no outrage. I'll get occasional complaints. Hey, why you got a cartoon of Muhammad in there? But it's just not the huge deal it was 10 or 12 years ago. And there's one reason for that. A bunch of people did it. And as long as this particular magazine is posting cartoons of Muhammad and they're the only ones doing it, or that person says we're going to draw Muhammad and that person is the only one doing it, as long as that's the case, well, you can threaten and kill. But when thousands of people all around the world all of a sudden do it, all of a sudden it's crickets chirping from the jihadis. They know, okay, there's nothing we can do now. We can't do anything about this.
Yeah. That was actually Molly Norris's point, that she called for an everybody draw Muhammad Day, because she said, well, they can't kill everyone. If everybody draws Muhammad, then the intimidation loses its power, because they can't go after the whole world. But as you noted, she not only went into hiding, but according to at least one report, the Seattle Weekly that had employed her said that she had actually, under FBI protection, changed her identity. And so she could be anywhere. But the threats were so imminent and so serious that she felt like she could not continue any longer as Molly Norris. And what's really the worst part of that is that nobody knows her. That should be a celebrated case, and she ought to be lionized and be a household name everywhere for being a champion of the freedom of speech. But, I hate to be negative, but you're right that the cartoons are much more common, but also the cowardice has become internalized and automatic to a tremendous degree nowadays. For example, when Charlie Hebdo published its new issue with the Muhammad cartoons on the cover again, I was working on Jihad Watch, and of course I wanted to feature that, but I wanted to feature the actual cover, a picture of the actual cover. And I had to go to the website. I searched via Google, I searched via other means, and nobody had it. And there were numerous stories, news stories, AP, Reuters, New York Times, Washington Post, about Charlie Hebdo running the cartoons again, but none of them actually carried an image of the cartoons or of the cover. And so only on the Charlie Hebdo website did I find the image. It's very clear that everybody knows this will cause trouble, and nobody has the courage to stand up and say, well, wait a minute, this creates more trouble than it solves if we kowtow to this, and only encourages more of it.
When you were talking about people looking for cartoons of Muhammad and not being able to find any, that reminded me. Do you remember Saturday Night Live actually sticking up for you guys in a kind of weak way, not overtly, but it looked like they were making an important point? Do you remember that?
No, this is news to me.
Really?
There was an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm that I thought was about us, but maybe not. But I never knew about Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, so no, Saturday Night Live, it was like a week or two. It was like a week or two after the attempt to kill you guys over the cartoon contest, and they had, I forget what the skit was called. It was called something like "Win, Lose, or Draw Muhammad" or something like that. But they didn't say it was going to be. They didn't say it was going to be anything about Muhammad. So it's just like it's just like this win, lose, or draw show where one person gets the clue and he has to draw it, and the other person has to guess it. And so he gets up, and his clue is the Prophet Muhammad, right? And he's just terrified, and he doesn't want to draw it, and he stands there, and his wife's going, "Come on, honey, this is for $10,000," and so on. And so it was classic.
Well, it is so ridiculous, David. I mean, I myself don't have any artistic talent, so I could draw you right now a stick figure with a round face and 2 dots for eyes, and the L for a nose and a straight line for a mouth, and then I could put a beard on it and something up above for a turban and say that's Muhammad, and then suddenly it's a death penalty offense. Mm-hmm. But if I did exactly the same thing and said this is my friend Ahmed, then it's okay. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing is so ridiculous, but people don't think this through. And unfortunately, rational thought is also at a premium today. Just as cowardice is pandemic, so is ill thought out, emotionalized reaction that does not take into account the full implications of what we're dealing with here.
And Molly Norris, one of the things she did, she was drawing basic things like coffee cups. And I remember she drew a coffee cup, and the coffee cup said, "I am Muhammad." And so she's making a point there about, hey, it's just a picture of a coffee cup, but if suddenly you say, this is Muhammad, now you have to die over it. And so, yeah, wild stuff. Quick shout out to Ali here. Ali says, David Wood, I discovered your channel 3 years ago. I left the religion of peace. Thanks to you. Love, brother, from Morocco. All right. Good to hear from you, Ali.
That's great.
Yep. And here's a good question. Robert. Benjamin Mandel said, is it possible to be a sincere leftist while acknowledging the societal threat of Islamic fundamentalism? I would say my view would be, if you were actually a sincere leftist who believes the things you claim to believe, of course you should be opposed to Islamic fundamentalism. Yes. What's your view on this, Robert?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. David, I've been doing this since 1492. And when I started out, I was young and naive. And I used to repeat at Jihad Watch quite frequently, this is not a left or right issue. This is an issue of defending our civilization. And, I actually thought that leftists were going to go for this. And maybe a handful did. But you're right. If you really believe in women's rights, then you can't believe in that Sharia is a wonderful thing. If you really believe in gay rights, same thing. If you really believe in the freedom of speech, which of course is increasingly problematic for the left, then you can't subscribe to Sharia. And so, yeah, on the face of it, if they really believe what they say, then they ought to be with us. Mm-hmm. And there are, as I say, as we both know, there are some leftists who are. But on the other hand, I think it's been revealing over the years that this has been, well, just the fact that, I'm just an American. Uh, I don't think that there's anything in particular that is unusual or out of the ordinary about what I do. I'm working in the defense of the freedom of speech, the freedom of conscience, the idea of the equality of rights of all people before the law. I believe that a society based on those ideas is superior to a Sharia society. That's basically it. And I've been characterized as far right all the time. Well, what is far right? If that's far right, then what? The Constitution is far right, and America itself is far right, and maybe they would say that. But the point is that this has been characterized as a left-right issue, although I tried to keep it from being so in the early days. And if leftists are indeed more interested in actually committed to their principles, then they'll be with it. But I think what's been most revealing about it is that the left in general is not committed to its principles. Mm-hmm. And consequently, most leftists are not against jihad violence and Sharia oppression, because apparently they are more interested in having a common enemy in the West, in Judeo-Christian civilization and culture, in the United States in particular, than they are in actually standing up for their stated principles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's insane, because you'd think that of all issues that everyone could just be united on, hey, let's not be violently subjugated. I mean, of all the things that you'd think, all right, here's one thing that everyone can agree on. We do not want to be controlled by that. We do not want to be forced to adhere to the commands of an illiterate 7th century caravan robber. You'd think, but no, you're right. Common enemy. It is interesting. Before I continue here, quick shout out here. Christ is the truth, said David. I found Christianity thanks to you. I was lost and I was sad and worried about my life. I cannot get baptized currently because of Muslim parents, but I accepted God and I thank you. You changed my life. Well, God bless you, Christ the truth. I hope to hear from you some more. You can get my email address if you go to my About page on my YouTube channel. And on this issue of far right, because I've had that experience. Now, here's what's interesting. When I lay out my actual views, if I'm talking about something else, and I'm just, on a completely different topic, I'll be sharing some of my political views, and people will start calling me far left extremist. They'll start saying, David, you're a social justice warrior because what you're saying about prison reform or something like that. And so it's just weird to think, what does far right mean? One, I don't want to be subjugated by Mohammed. The only thing you could actually say that I'm like firmly right on would be abortion. Other than that, I'm kind of, I don't care a whole lot. Stay out of my face. Other than that, right, left, show me that it works. Show me that whatever you're proposing is going to work. I resist the extremes, like, anything having to do with socialism or something like that. Get that nonsense out of my face. Other than that, I'm a pretty laid back kind of guy. Minus the sex scandals and stuff. I don't have much of a problem with like a Clinton type or something like that. Again, except on the issue of abortion. So I'm pretty laid back on a lot of things. And so when I say I have a problem with jihad and with having sex with prepubescent girls and with chopping body parts, I have a problem with these things. And it's, you're a far right extremist who just hates brown people. No, it's you all agree with us. You all, left, right, middle, you all agree with what Robert and I are saying. There's only two kinds of people here. The people who are honest enough to admit it and the people who are too cowardly to admit it, right? We all agree. We're all on the same page.
Yep, that's right. Nobody really is in favor of any of this. The stonings, the amputations, the whole panoply of Sharia punishments. Nobody is really in favor of any of that unless you are a true believer. But we say so, and other people say, oh, you're Islamophobic for saying that. And yet, if you were to ask them, they themselves hold to the same views. Far right really just means the political and media elites want you to dislike this person, so they're going to call him far right. And that's it. There's no substance to it. Otherwise, I mean, maybe there is for real neo-Nazis or something. There are probably 5 or 6 of those people around. But this term has been wildly misused, and it's extraordinary. You know, there was something else in regard to that, actually, David, that I've been getting a lot lately of people saying Spencer is somebody who actually openly admits to being an Islamophobe. Because I wrote a book a few years ago called Confessions of an Islamophobe, and now I think it's at the top of my Wikipedia bio that he openly acknowledges he's an Islamophobe, and this is the silliest thing I've ever heard. Because of course what they're trying to do is say, oh, you want to have innocent Muslims victimized or something like that, which of course I've repeatedly denounced and opposed, but what I was saying when I actually took the term was, I'm against Sharia punishments. I'm for equality of rights of women. I'm against restrictions on the freedom of speech for blasphemy. I'm against killing people for saying or drawing something you don't like. And people say because of that I'm an Islamophobe. Well, if that's what being an Islamophobe is, then you ought to be an Islamophobe too. Every reasonable person ought to be an Islamophobe. And of course, the rest of that is they really are. They just don't want to come out and say it. Or when they say they're against these things, then they insist that they have nothing to do with Islam, which of course is total fantasy.
Yep. And this would actually, the discussion of far right, because there are far right groups, and so that was I wasn't following the story in Sweden closely, just because I was focused on a lot of other things. So as far as I remember, the only reading I did on it was from your site, from Jihad Watch, and so there sorry, I have to bring this up. The Soul's Journey says Fareed Responds is David Wood's biggest enemy. I don't know if you're joking or if you're a Fareed Responds fan, but I've watched one Fareed Responds video ever, and the last thing Fareed Responds tried to do is get me banned from Patreon, and him and Mohammad Hijab ended up getting me like 200 and some change, over 200 new patrons. So they're getting me piles of money. So man, if my biggest enemy is sending me piles of money and new supporters, wow, give me some more enemies like that, because I like those kind of enemies. the ones who are gonna fund all my future work and the work of many other apologists to come. Awesome. Hey Fareed, if you're watching, and I know you're watching, hey man, send the word out to your fans again. Say we got to crack down more on this dude's Patreon, man. It's working like magic for me. All right. So the thing in Sweden, I had no idea what it was about, except for I knew that someone was burning a Quran, or so there was some demonstration for burning the Quran, and then I saw pictures popping up of streets burning and stuff like that. So I was reading one of your articles on that, and so someone was supposed to come and visit from another country or something like that. Why don't you tell us who that is about? Is that like because I saw far right. Is that an actual far right group, or is that someone who gets labeled a far right group to smear them, or who is that?
I don't know a whole lot about this group. I'll tell you, David, it's the Hardline Party in Denmark, and they are characterized as anti-immigration. But everything I've been able to see from them says they're not anti-immigration; they're anti-immigration without assimilation. And so they want Muslims and anybody else who's come into the country who does not plan to obey Danish law or does not respect Danish law to be repatriated. as far as I understand it. I hope I'm just characterizing that accurately. Maybe somebody who's in the party can set us straight here. But their leader, Rasmus Paludan, he was supposed to go to Sweden in order to participate in this event, and he has burned Qurans before. And the Swedish authorities actually banned him from the country. He had already arrived in Malmo, and they arrested him there and sent him out. Now, what's noteworthy about that, of course, is that he was going to do this burning of the Quran. And a police spokesman in Malmo said, "We suspect that he was going to break the law in Sweden." Well, is burning a book against the law in Sweden? Is burning a Quran against the law in Sweden now? Ordinarily, this has been understood as being a factor of the freedom of expression. Certainly, I mean, I'm against burning books myself. The Nazis burned books. It's just not something I want to emulate. But I know, and as far as the Quran goes, I'd rather everybody read the Quran and understand what's in it. And then the world would be a very different place. But it's not illegal. If I were to, in the United States right now, take a copy of one of my books and burn it, nobody's going to arrest me. Mm-hmm. Or even the Quran, as far as I know, if I were to do a Quran burning video tomorrow, nobody would arrest me. But Rasmus Paludan was arrested in Sweden and sent out. And what's noteworthy is that the spokesman for the cops said, "We suspect he was going to break the law in Sweden. There was also a risk that his behavior would pose a threat to society." Now, those are the key words. There was also the risk that his behavior would pose a threat to society. Now, does it really threaten Swedish society or Danish society if some guy burns a Quran? How does it harm Swedish society that a Quran is burning somewhere? There are millions of Qurans, probably billions of Qurans all over the world. How is society hurt by that? And obviously the answer is because Muslims will riot. So the problem is not Rasmus Paludan. The problem is Muslims rioting. But the Malmo police know that it's a lot easier to pick on Rasmus and send him out of the country than it is to deal with the Muslims who are rioting. And it's the same thing when I was banned from Britain, and other people have been banned from Britain as well. They said that my coming to Britain would not be conducive to the common good. Well, what does that mean? It means Muslims will get angry if I'm there, and they might riot. I'm not going to be rioting. I'm not going to be inciting or justifying or approving of any violence, but they will. And so we don't want to deal with them. We'll deal with you. You're a lot easier. You're banned.
Now, were you going there to burn Qurans?
Nope. We were actually going there. Pamela Geller and I were going there to lay a wreath at the tomb of Lee Rigby, the British military man who was beheaded on a street in London in broad daylight by a Muslim who then went up to a guy who was videoing nearby and started to explain to him how Surah At-Tawbah, the 9th chapter of the Quran, told him that he had to make war against unbelievers, specifically the people of the book, and that's why he killed Lee Rigby. And, it's just part of the clown world we live in now, that that man, Michael Abedolaho, I think his name is, he was a convert to Islam, and he and his accomplice, who was also a convert to Islam, when they went on trial, the British non-Muslim judge started to lecture them about how they were misunderstanding their religion of peace. Mm-hmm. And they started to yell at him in court and say, "What are you talking about? You don't know anything about Islam. Yep. We did this in exact accord with Islamic teaching." But of course, you can't say that in Britain now. Only Islamophobes say that. And that's why they're banned from the country. No, we were not going to burn a Quran. We were not going to cause any trouble at all. We were going there to lay a wreath at a memorial for a man who was murdered. But that would get people mad nowadays in Britain, the people who the British authorities are eagerly kowtowing to, and so it could not be done.
Yeah, and you'd think that at that time in Great Britain, I mean, they two jihadis basically beheaded Lee Rigby right in the street in the name of Islam. And you'd think that there would have been a similar reaction to what we saw after the Charlie Hebdo massacre, where, I mean, it looked like there were tens of thousands of people gathered together in solidarity. And what was interesting, this was also in the New York Times article, tons of people believed that Charlie Hebdo was absolutely disgusting, right? It has a bad reputation of just being massively over offensive to everyone. And so people just, it was really offensive to lots of people. But when they started getting massacred, then it's okay, well, we're gonna show solidarity in spite of how disgusting we find this magazine ordinarily. You'd think that in a place like Great Britain there would be a similar reaction, in that, hey, now you're just openly killing people in the streets and then stopping for interviews. If he was a little later and there were, I mean, he'd have been, snapping selfies with people. But, you'd think there would have been a similar reaction, in that, yes, anyone who wants to come together with us right now, anyone who wants to join together in solidarity with, over the execution of Lee Rigby, everyone is welcome. Instead, hey, we need to make sure that no one offends Muslims in Great Britain after this. You got these jihadis and they beheaded someone, but we need to protect the feelings of Muslims after this. And so this is a
staple of the press reaction to all these jihad attacks. I, of course, have been tracking jihad attacks every day at Jihad Watch for the last several hundred years. And in every case of a jihad massacre, there is a story in the mainstream press afterward about how the local mosque is very worried about Islamophobia and have asked for extra police protection in the wake of this attack because they fear a backlash. There is no story ever about the ideology that drove the attack in the first place. There is no story about people who might feel threatened because this kind of thing keeps happening. Every last one of these attacks is treated as an isolated, discrete incident, usually carried out by somebody who was mentally ill, and it has no connection to any other attack anywhere at any time, and it has no discernible ideological root. But the big problem after each one is that we have to be worried that there'll be a backlash against innocent Muslims. This is such a common reaction that they could just as well print pads of a template where they said there was a terrorist attack at such and such a place at such and such a time, and the local mosque, this name, has asked for extra police protection in light of the backlash, which hardly ever materializes. And that's the end. Then it drops off the radar. The focus is entirely on Muslims as victims, on the Muslim community feeling threatened after the attack, and on nothing else. Nothing about the larger implications of somebody invoking the Quran while he's standing there with a bloody cleaver having just cut off somebody's head on the street. Nobody says, wait a minute, does the Quran really say that? And if so, can we try to work toward some genuine reform or genuine soul searching among Muslims of goodwill? It's not even a conversation.
Mm-hmm. And the point you're making about these things being treated as isolated incidents with just weird individuals. I mean, the trial that's going on now, and many of the trials in the past, should show the absurdity of that, right? So you had these two jihadis attack the offices of Charlie Hebdo, but then there was also the attack at the kosher market, and now you've got the trial of 14 accomplices. There are a lot of mentally ill people doing some very intricate plotting here,
yes,
coming up with these plans, and it happens over and over and over again. In almost every one of these terrorist attacks, there's the person or people who carry out the attack, and then all the people who are helping them with the attack. If you look at the grooming gang, the rape gang scandals in the UK, you look at the list of people who were involved in one of these rape gangs, and you've got brothers, sometimes you've got father and son. This is a family affair for some of these guys. And it's just amazing, because if I went up to one of my friends and said, hey guys, I've got this plan. We're all going to get together and gang rape this 12-year-old girl. I can't think of, my friends are people in my family, my cousins, my brothers, anyone. And if I run this by them, they're going to figure out, one, they're going to see if I'm joking or not. And if they think I'm serious, they're going to clock me in my jaw over saying some stuff like this. But here it's just completely acceptable. And yet, hey, it's just a coincidence that this is happening over and over and over again in various cities across the UK and in various places around the world. I mean, even before these stories became popular, because, the news break in the UK, we were hearing stories about, these things in Northern Europe. We were hearing stories about these things in Australia. And so it just keeps happening. When do you ever get to a point where you say, this isn't random here. This isn't just some random weird person. There's something there, and we need to get to the bottom of it.
Even worse in Britain is that they knew, just like we were discussing before about how leftists, at least some of them, they know that Sharia is inhumane and that it's draconian and that it is devaluing of women and everything else. They know, but they don't dare say it. And in the same way, the British authorities knew. They knew what was behind this. They knew who was doing it, and they systematically covered it up for years. And there were several stories that have come out now of authorities in Rotherham, where there were 1,500 girls who were victimized, maybe more, and other places being afraid of being called racist if they prosecuted these rape gangs that were largely Pakistani Muslims, almost exclusively Pakistani Muslims. And there were girls who would go, and their fathers who would go to the police and say this is happening, and the police would turn them away and sometimes even say, we can't do anything about this because it's racist. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, the rapists are not dealing on the basis of well, some of them actually did deal on the basis of race, but some of them were quoting Quran and explaining to their victims that this was something that the Quran allowed. It's very much like in the ISIS territories a few years back. There were some stories of the Yazidi sex slaves and the rapists actually doing their Islamic prayers and then raping them and saying that raping you is part of my prayer to Allah. Because after all, if this is something that is sanctioned in the Quran, then Allah must be pleased with you if you do it. Mm-hmm. So it's an act of worship.
Yep. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, if you oppose any of this in any way, you're an Islamophobe. You're a bigot.
And you're far right.
Yeah. I was talking about this with Harris Sultan yesterday, and I think I was talking about that with the apostate prophet before, that, 10 or 12 years ago, we're talking about, sex slaves and, beating women and all these different things that we read about in the Muslim sources. We talk about these things, and people would call us Islamophobes, but they would say, no, Islam doesn't teach that you can have sex with a 9-year-old girl. No, Islam doesn't teach that you kill apostates. No, Islam doesn't teach that. You guys are Islamophobes. That's why you're completely misinterpreting Islam. Whereas now we've been pointing in recent months. I mean, Ali Dawah is openly says you can have sex with a 9-year-old girl. He said in a recent video, yes, of course, apostate prophet, when we take over, yes, we're going to kill you. You're going to be killed by the government in an Islamic state. But they'll still call us Islamophobes. So now they're basically saying, yes, you're correct. We're going to kill you critics. We're going to kill you apostates. We can have sex with 9-year-old girls. We're going to do all of these things that you guys have been saying for years. Islam teaches, yes, all these things are true. You're completely correct. But if you oppose any of this, you're an Islamophobe. So the term has just massively changed meaning over the past few years.
Also, it's just amazing to me how all these things now, as you've noted, are being admitted that they denied for years. And it reminds me of another one is Shabir Ali. And Shabir, for a few years ago, he and I were supposed to debate in Toronto. And then suddenly, without any warning or explanation, the whole thing was called off. And then Shabir was going around saying that I had called it off. And I said, no, I certainly did not call it off. And I would be very happy to debate you. And let's set it up. Never heard from him. Nadir Ahmed, actually, who I think we've both debated, Nadir, the famous worst debater in the history of the world, he emailed me a few months ago, and he said, why don't you debate Shabir Ali? And I said, he's ducking me, but if you can get him to agree, I'll debate him. And he said, I'll get back to you. And of course, that's the last I ever heard from him. But the point is that I think that last week it became clear why Shabir doesn't want to debate. And that is, it came out that a program that he was on a few years ago, actually, but it's just come to light now, or come to wider attention outside his followers, that he said, yes, of course, a Muslim man can take infidel sex slaves. And yes, of course, a man can force his wife to have sex at any time, and she has no right to refuse, and so on and so on. All these things that I'm sure that if the debate had gone off with Shabir in 2008 and those things had come up, he would have denied it. And certainly Muslims have denied that these things are part of Islam for years. And here's one of their leading apologists openly admitting it now. And it's on par with Ali Dawah saying, yeah, we're going to kill the apostates. And, I used to hear all these people. I used to get it routinely, as a matter of fact, and I'm sure you did too. Muslims writing me and saying, no, you racist, Islamophobic, anti-Muslim bigot. Aisha was 18 when Muhammad married her, not 6, not 9 when he consummated the marriage. She was 21 or whatever. Of course, and it's based on some weak hadith from some collection that's completely uncanonical, completely ignoring the fact that Bukhari, the most reliable hadith collection, in multiple places affirms that she was 6 at the marriage and 9 at the consummation. But now we see it. I've got a whole collection at Jihad Watch that I publish periodically of Islamic authorities around the world saying there's no minimum age for marriage. None. You can marry a little baby. No problem. And it's really extraordinary. The Aisha was 18 crowd has suddenly somehow vanished. Just like the secular Turkey is the wave of the future in the Islamic world crowd. I used to hear from them all the time. And I haven't heard from any of them in years. Somehow they've lost their enthusiasm for secular Turkey. I don't know why.
Yeah, I remember back when Obama went to do his Cairo speech. And it was just very, very, very common for, I don't know if I can say most, but certainly a lot of people to think that the only reason you have all these jihadis and terrorist attacks is just people in the Muslim world feel like they've been disrespected. They haven't been shown, they've been bullied and they haven't been shown proper respect. And if someone just goes over there, showers them with praise, showers their religion with praise, says, hey, we love and respect you, then, their hearts will melt and everything is going to be wonderful. And so when Obama went over there, you saw the whole attitude was, guys, you don't know how to deal with Islam. You don't know how to deal with the Middle East. You've been doing it all wrong. You had leaders who are a bunch of jerks, and that is not the way to get through to these people. You have to show some respect. You have to bow to them a bunch, and then they're going to love you. Watch what happens. So he comes over, they cheer him, everyone loves him, and then you get the entire breakdown of the Middle East. You get ISIS, you get the collapse of multiple nations, massive, jihadist groups taking over. And what's now, all of that is horrible. But, something that came out of it is I don't hear that much anymore. I don't hear, if you just show them that, you respect them and respect their religion and you acknowledge how abusive you've been in the past and that your country's been a big bully, then they're going to love you. I don't see it anymore. So as difficult it is, the tie-in is this. We keep saying one thing over and over and over and over and over again, year after year after year after year after year, because all we're saying is what's in the Muslim sources. So we're saying this is what Islam is. This is what Islam teaches. You'll have Muslims that don't believe that. You'll have Muslims that do believe that. But at the end of the day, this is what Islam teaches. And so this is going to keep creeping up. It's going to keep rearing its head over and over and over again. So we say that, and then it's almost like, 2005, you're a liar. 2006, you're a liar. 2007, you're a liar. 2008, you're a liar. 2012, okay, you're right. But you're still lying about this. 2012, you're a liar. 2013, you're a liar. 2014, you're a liar. 2015, okay, you were right. But you're still lying about this. In 2015, you're a liar. 2016, 2020, okay, now Ali Dawah's now they're all admitting pretty much everything you guys have ever said was completely correct. But, it's still mean. You're still mean. Don't draw cartoons, because it's offensive. This is some amazing stuff. Daniel Lavalli here. What in the world is this? Daniel Lavalli said, David, why you dislike socialism? why don't I dislike socialism? One, it's evil. Two, it's massively delusional. Three, it's stupid. Four, it will never work anywhere. Yeah.
And 5, there's a pile of dead bodies from wherever it's been tried.
Yeah. And 6, if someone in some really, really messed up country where things are just really bad and they wanted to try it, okay, you try it and see if anything gets better. My real objection to it is in places, like the United States, where you have the most powerful, most prosperous nation the world has ever seen. And here's what you can say. It doesn't mean everything's perfect. Doesn't mean there aren't things you need to work on. But whatever it means you got a lot of big things right. You could still be wrong on some issues, but it means you got a lot of the big things right if you ended up as the most powerful and most prosperous nation in the world. So when someone comes in and starts saying, we need to radically change everything, all the foundations of our society, well, what's your theory here, ladies and gentlemen? Whatever we've been doing has made us the most powerful, most prosperous nation the world has ever seen. If you change everything, what are the odds that you're going to get better? Especially if all the policies you want to change it to are the same policies we see in nations that self-destruct. What are that's why I say it's so completely ridiculous and idiotic. So if you say you want to change some things, that's fine. When you say we need to fundamentally change everything and level it to the ground, I have to regard you as a complete lunatic. Any thoughts on that, Ron?
It seems like a strong delusion has overcome them. Large segments of the American population. You're absolutely right. Nothing is more abundantly proven to be a failure than socialism. And there are so many socialist societies that were economic basket cases and human rights abusers of the first order, that the idea that we are actually flirting with this ideology again now in America in 2020, in the most successful and prosperous society in the world, it's absolutely appalling. But it is the result of a concerted effort to rewrite American history, to make us ashamed of our history, to put into the heads of the young people all these ideas like systemic racism and so on that are not based on reality, that are not true. Of course, there's been racism in American society, but the idea that it is systemic, inherent, constant in every stratum, it's ridiculous, and it denies the fact that America is actually the most unracist society that there's ever been, that has actually addressed its racist past and corrected for it. Whatever you think of Obama, it was a great thing that he became president, because he was a member of a minority that had previously been discriminated against. There are very few countries in the world that have chosen as their head of state a member of a previously discriminated against minority, and that's a major thing. But in the schools today, and for decades now, American students have been taught to hate America. And that's actually why I wrote my new book, Rating America's Presidents, an America First guide to who's best, who's overrated, and who is an absolute disaster. It's a little bit off topic, but I just thought I would mention that. It's an antidote to the left's war on history.
Yeah, there was a time when people were proud to be American. Right? I mean, yeah. I remember when I was, I've traveled to Europe and so on, and it was cool. It was cool being American. People, wow, you're American. It's so cool. Now, I think basically I think a lot of college professors and so on realize that the better things get, the harder it is to make a case for rapid, large scale change, right? I mean, the better the better people are getting financially and the better everything is getting, the harder it is to say, we need to burn all this to the ground. And so, well, what do? You just, you think this is great? No, we're as evil as possible. It's the most evil place that's ever been. That's why we need to burn it all to the ground. And then they go out, yeah, burn it all to the ground, burn everything. Ah!
That's where we are.
And that's why these guys can get on board with jihadis. That's how they can end up in the same
Because they want to burn everything to the ground too. Mm-hmm. So they have a unity of purpose and a shared hatred of the West, of the United States in particular, of Judeo-Christian civilization. They want to burn it all down. The left, the jihadis both do, and that's their fundamental alliance. That's the key to their alliance.
Yep, and now I don't know. Did I bring up prepubescent girls here? Hang on.
Well, we were talking about 9-year-olds.
Okay, so Abdul Jama said, Allah forbade sexual relations with someone prepubescent. You liar.
Oh, yeah. Aisha is supposed to have been pubescent at 9. Yeah, I've heard that one a lot. I thought that one had gone out, too. That's so absurd, but okay.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the new lie. So, I'm sorry I have to go on a little tangent here, Robert, but I do like schooling people like Abdul Jama here, especially when, I mean, this was a couple months ago, but I still have the sources pulled up here. So, let's read Abdul Jama's case here. Allah forbade sexual relations with someone prepubescent, and it's clear in Islamic doctrine, notice he's not quoting any source here, right, ladies and gentlemen? And it's clear in Islamic doctrine, lol, it's also factual that humans developed quicker back then. And even there are post-pubescent 9-year-olds. Well, I'm not going to deny...
What about 65:4? What about the Quran that says you can divorce a woman and she still has the waiting period even if she is not yet menstruated? That means she's prepubescent.
Yep.
And you're divorcing, which means you were married to her.
Yep, no question here. And let's just go through these quickly because, again, I have the sources here. So this is Sahih al-Bukhari. Notice the chapter heading here, Abdul. Giving one's young children in marriage is permissible. Why? By virtue of the statement of Allah, and for those who have, notice he's quoting Surah 65:4, which Robert just cited. Why is it okay to give one's young children in marriage? It's permissible by virtue of the statement of Allah, and for those who have no monthly courses, i.e. they are still immature. No monthly courses, that's referring to a monthly period. What does this mean? This is talking about prepubescent girls, and notice he even says it. And the iddah, that's the waiting period, after having sex, if you're going to divorce her, and the iddah for the girl before puberty is 3 months in the above verse. So in the Quran, you wait 3 months to divorce a prepubescent girl after you've had sex with her. And then we have the hadith, 5133, narrated Aisha, that the Prophet wrote the marriage contract with her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old, and then she remained with him for 9 years, i.e. till his death. Doesn't sound like Bukhari's on board with you. Let's read a couple more. The marrying of a daughter to a ruler. So 5134, narrated Aisha that the Prophet wrote the marriage contract with her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old. Hisham said, I have been informed that Aisha remained with the Prophet for 9 years, i.e. till his death. Now we have 5158, narrated Urwa, the Prophet wrote the marriage contract with Aisha while she was 6 years old and consummated his marriage with her while she was 9 years old, and she remained with him for 9 years, i.e. till his death. Now watch what happens here. Watch what's going to happen here, Abdul. 6130, Sahih al-Bukhari, narrated Aisha, I used to play with the dolls in the presence of the Prophet, and my girlfriends also used to play with me. Now, hopefully, Abdul, you're thinking to yourself, what? You're not supposed to play with dolls in the presence of Muhammad, right? Those images are forbidden. Well, let's keep reading. When Allah's messenger used to enter my dwelling place, they used to hide themselves, but the Prophet would call them to join and play with me. In parentheses, the playing with dolls and similar images is forbidden, but it was allowed for Aisha at that time as she was a little girl, not yet reached the age of puberty. She's allowed to continue playing with dolls because she hadn't reached the age of puberty. In other words, once you reach the age of puberty, then you're responsible to not play with dolls anymore. You couldn't have images. 3480, this is Sahih Muslim. It was narrated that Aisha said, the Prophet married me when I was 6 years old and consummated the marriage when I was 9 years old. 3481, it was narrated from Aisha. And here's the key. Notice, 3481, it was narrated from Aisha that the Prophet married her when she was 7 years old. So notice, that's the only disagreement in these sources, is whether she was 6 or 7 when the marriage contract was written. Apart from that, they all agree that she was 9 when Muhammad had sex with her. It was narrated from Aisha that the Prophet married her when she was 7 years old, and she was taken to him as a bride when she was 9 years old, and she took her dolls with her. He died when she was 18 years old. Now, Abdul, you may recall here, are girls allowed to play with dolls once they've reached the age of puberty? No. And yet, when she's taken to Muhammad's house for sex, she still has her dolls. She still has her dolls. What's that mean? It means she had not reached puberty. So Abdul, look, Abdul, let me break this down for you. As we pointed out, for years when we've been discussing this, no, Aisha was 18 when Muhammad had sex with her. She was 16, she was 15, something like that, but she certainly wasn't 9. Now almost all Muslim apologists acknowledge that she was 9. Sheikh Yasser Qadi even calls you a liar if you deny this, right? He says, don't lie. We don't lie for our religion, right? But the new thing has been, but it's okay because she reached puberty. That's our new thing. Yeah, she reached puberty. That's why it's okay. We go to the Muslim sources. What do they say? Stop lying. Your prophet, the pattern of conduct in Islam, climbed on top of a prepubescent 9-year-old girl. Deal with it. If you don't like it, there's the door. Find your way out of Islam. All right. Sorry about that, Robert. Sometimes we have to,
no problem. That was great.
Sometimes we have to deal with these kinds of things. All right, let's shift back onto what we were talking about. So we had the thing in Norway, and I wasn't sure about the connection between Sweden and Norway. Were those actually connected? Like, what was one connected to the other, or were they just spontaneously separate issues that came up?
Well, they were sort of connected and sort of spontaneous. What happened was the event went on in Sweden, even without Rasmus Paludan. And then there were riots. And when there were riots, then a group in Norway, and I have even less information about who that group was, unfortunately, in part because my news articles are not coming in. A lot of computer trouble tonight. All day. I told you your email disappeared.
I've been having problems all day too.
It's very strange. But in any case, a woman. Oh, here we go. It was Stop Islamization of Norway, and I'm not familiar with them, but of course I was part of Stop Islamization of America, and all we wanted to do was oppose the imposition of Sharia that comes in incidents like this. That we kowtow to the threats, and we stop doing whatever they threaten us that they will kill us if we do. Then we're just inviting them to do more, as we have discussed, and that means more Sharia provisions will be forced upon us. But Sharia blasphemy laws are already well on their way to being accepted by us. And so I don't know if Stop Islamization of Norway is some terrible group with terrible positions, but I'd rather think not, just because my own positions have been so mischaracterized and misrepresented over the years. Tend to be suspicious whenever I see that some group is far right and all that nonsense. In any case, they had a rally in which they reacted to the riots in Sweden by a woman who actually stood up and ripped up the Quran. And she said, now I'm going to desecrate the Quran. And she started ripping pages out of it. And so then the riots started there, with the Muslim protesters throwing eggs at the Stop Islamization of Norway people and trying to jump the barricades and get at them and attack them physically. So we had two separate incidents of rage over desecration of the Quran, one in Sweden and one in Norway, but it seems as if the one in Norway was a reaction to what had happened in Sweden.
Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. So for some reason, a lot of people tend to freak out when they hear, "Oh, a book was burned," or I'm on the same page with you. When I think of book burning, I think of Nazis burning books and so on. I think I think even if you want to, go after a book or something like that, that approach has kind of been tainted, right? It's like naming your kid Adolf now, or having getting a little mustache. You just can't do it anymore, right? It's kind of been ruined. So yeah, not a fan of book burning. There are situations, like it would depend on the situation. If it were like an ex-Muslim who said, I'm under a death threat and I'm sick of this book, and so I'm going to do this to show my disgust with this religion, calling for my death and so on. But as just a general, I'm going to offend you by burning your book, I would think that's kind of silly. Or even ripping up a book if someone does something like that, because we've done that here. The question is always, what's the point you're trying to get out of this? What is the point you're trying to make? And let's see if this is a good way to make your point. But regardless of all of that, it's always in my mind when someone burns a Quran or rips up a Quran or does this form of protest, it's always in my mind, well, okay, what's cool here is this person's not getting violent. This person is using freedom of speech, trying to make this point by doing this, but isn't going out and killing people. And so, it just seems like it should be viewed as good if you have some groups and they really disagree with each other, and at the end of the day, they want to rip up each other's stuff, but they're not going out chopping each other's heads off. And the reason I say that is there are places in the world where you disagree with someone has to die. And throughout a lot of human history, if you had some disagreements on some important issues, people were going to die. And so if we're at a point in history where the most angry I ever get, I burn something that you like, that doesn't actually hurt you. It's something I bought with my own money, and I burn it to show you how much I disagree with your views. If we've gotten to that position, we kind of should be looking at this going, good, right? That's progress. They're not killing each other. And yet over and over again, what you see is, hey, these people who are doing this, which doesn't physically hurt anyone, justifies this physical violence in return.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people take it for granted as if that's a reasonable reaction, when really everyone seems to have lost sight of the fact that if they didn't riot, if jihadis didn't try to kill people, and sometimes actually kill people for desecrating the Quran or drawing Muhammad or things like that, then nobody would do it. People do it because they're threatened to kill. They threaten to kill, or they do kill. It's actually kind of paradoxical, since I was saying before that I've had people say, you were just poking the bear and needlessly provoking them and so on, as if it was totally gratuitous. But actually, everybody who has desecrated the Quran or drawn Muhammad in recent years, none of that is gratuitous. Mm-hmm. Every last person who has done it is reacting to the fact that the reaction to this is violent and irrational and totally out of proportion to the act itself. And that consequently, to try to inject a little sanity into the proceedings, they go ahead and do this to show that it's really a small thing. If you tear a page out of a book and eat it, what does that hurt? Who cares? Why? I saw it. I thought, well, that's funny, and that was a nice shot that you did when you spit it out. That it made for good still pictures. But that's it. It's not like we've lost that part of the Quran, like the goat that ate the part that was under Aisha's pillow in the Hadith. That part's gone forever. But anybody can pick up another copy of the Quran and see what part of it that you ripped out. Big deal. Mm-hmm. The fact that people will kill over that or threaten to kill over that is absolute madness that we are increasingly taking for granted and acting as if it's completely justified and rational. And it's in response to that irrationality that they get more of it, that more people start to do this desecration to try to bring us back to reality.
Mm-hmm. And so here's the weird coincidences of all these events coming together. So you had the Sweden Quran burning, which then led to the riots in Malmo. And this is apparently followed by, if I'm getting this correct, this is apparently followed by a woman being angered at a rally. She's angered, I'm guessing she's angered by, I guess the riots or something like that. And in response to this, she says, look, I'm ripping up your book or something like that. Again, if she's got a point out of that, I would have to understand exactly what her reasoning is for, but at the end of the day, she's not hurting people, and I'm fine with that. But simultaneously, kind of, shortly before that, we had Mohammad Hijab announcing that he's starting this new campaign where instead of going after the critics of Islam, he's going after their wives. Hey, I'm going after all your wives. I'm going to start posting pictures of your wives and saying all kinds of perverted, violent things about your wives. Sick, twisted language, and imagery of rape and torture about all your wives. Now, I've had Surah 6, verse 108 of the Quran in my pocket for many years now. With the understanding that if someone stepped across a serious line, I would pull that trump card out. Surah 6, verse 108. So Surah 6, verse 108, it's kind of, it's not entirely clear without the historical background, but it says in effect, don't insult their gods lest they insult your God, in ignorance. If you look at the historical background, Muhammad and his followers were insulting, mocking the gods and goddesses of the pagans. And the pagans tried everything they could to negotiate an agreement. Even in the Muslim sources, the polytheists had no problem with Muhammad preaching Islam. They had a problem with him making fun of and mocking their gods. And so they would go, and try to negotiate. Muhammad just insisted on continuing to heap abuse and insults on their gods and goddesses. And eventually they said, look, we've had it up to here. If you don't stop mocking our gods and goddesses, we're going to mock Allah and we're going to insult Allah. We don't want to do it, but we're going to do it if you don't stop. And so that's when Surah 6, verse 108 comes down saying, in order to stop them from mocking Allah, you stop the mocking. And so this is basically saying, hey, if a Muslim is insulting and heaping abuse on someone and you say, you know what, you're going to stop this, or I'm going to start mocking something from your religion, he's supposed to stop. So I went ahead and pulled that out. Ate a piece of the Quran, warned Mohammad Hijab that, I'll keep doing that until he takes down his tweets and so on. Mohammad Hijab stopped immediately. Notice it worked. Mm-hmm. It worked like magic. He immediately stopped the attacks on people's wives, but so far he's still refused to take down the tweets. But he will eventually. So we had that issue rising, and that one's going to continue. But the timing is interesting because you had the things going on in Sweden and Norway. I think around the same time or shortly after that or something like that, and after that, we had the apostate prophet who was on, and I noticed this sort of took on new life with the ex-Muslim crowd because they were upset with Mohammad Hijab for insulting, people's wives, Abdullah Samir's wife and the apostate prophet's wife. They were upset about that, but they were also upset that so many Muslims and some non-Muslims were freaking out over me eating a piece of the Quran, and not upset at all about Ali Dawah saying that apostates are going to be killed. Right? They're saying, are you serious? Are you serious that it's worse? The thing that really bothered you got these two things in front of you. We're going to slaughter all these people. This guy took a bite out of the Quran. That's the thing that bothers you. And this is just completely...
Well, sure.
Yeah.
That's Sharia. Your life and your wife's life is just not as important as those of a Muslim. That's Islamic law, right? Even when you're talking about the blood money, it's just not as much if you kill a non-Muslim than it is if you kill a Muslim. Mm-hmm. Your life is not as valuable. And of course, every human being's life is not as important as the Quran, because it's the al-Kitab, the mother of the book, the perfect book that's been in paradise with Allah forever and all these things. So you insult the Quran, it's much worse for a pious, believing Muslim than him insulting your wife. As a matter of fact, him insulting your wife that's what you deserve, because you are an unbeliever and thus worthless, and an unbeliever who dares to criticize Islam, which brings the death penalty itself. But obviously, of course, what he's trying to do is the same exact thing that the people who threaten the Quran desecrators and Quran burners are doing.
Same
They're
goal.
trying to intimidate us into submission. It is absolutely a constant of jihadis, of Islamic supremacists, even of some of the ex-Muslims, that they carry over the cultural attitudes that they grew up with, and they traffic in intimidation. They are all about trying to frighten the people that they dislike into doing their will. And so Mohammad Hijab knows that nothing he can say to you is going to bother you, or say about you is going to bother you. But, well, what might bother you if you think that your wife is being put in danger? That would bother any man. Mm-hmm. So he figures that's the way to intimidate you. And it's exactly the same motion. The more that we agree to this intimidation, the more we acquiesce to it, the more of it we're going to get. And so the best thing we can do in every last case, without exception, is refuse to be intimidated and stand up to those who are trying to do it, whether it be by desecrating the Quran, by drawing Muhammad, by doing whatever it is that they are telling us not to do, on pain of something even worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so everyone follow the reasoning here. In a Muslim country, in a place like Pakistan or something like that, they'll make you adhere to the commands of Muhammad. They'll make you adhere to the commands of an illiterate 7th century caravan robber. They'll make you. They'll chop your head off or something like that. They'll hang you if you get out of line. They'll at least lock you up and beat you or mob you or something like that. Well, you get to the West, where our rights are supposedly protected. So you can't just say, well, you're going to be beheaded for this, or you're going to be stoned to death for this. You can't say that sort of thing. But what will happen is the jihadis of the West, or the Muhammad Hijabs and Ali Dawahs of the West, will try to enforce the same thing using different methods. So it's just, hey, I can't have the government arrest this person and execute this person. I can't do that here because we don't have that legal system, but let me try something else. And so that might be, hey, we're going to go slaughter all of you. We're going to gun you down in your offices, as they did with the Charlie Hebdo. But much more common to just heap abuse on you. Hey, if you're not doing what we want, we're going to heap abuse on you. If that doesn't work, we're going to threaten you. And then Mohammad Hijab's brilliant theory was, well, if that doesn't work, I'll go after your families. I'll go after your wives. Because even if you aren't afraid, you don't want your wife. You don't want your wife being harassed. And so if I start a campaign to harass your wives with violent rape imagery and torture imagery, now you're gonna rethink this. That's the ticket. Now I've got you guys on a leash. And so anyway, I took a bite out of the Quran over that. Then it was, well, now I'm going to get you defunded on Patreon. All of a sudden, I have more patrons than I've ever had before in my entire life. And so what Robert is saying, look, above all else, and this is the real point. This is the real point of the Quran contest, or of, taking a bite out of the Quran, is, to all our Muslim friends out there, get it out of your heads that you control us. Get rid of that idea. Just get rid of that idea and we're good, right? Stop trying to control us and stop plotting to control us in the future. Get it through your heads. We're not going to be controlled by the commands of an illiterate 7th century caravan robber. We're just not. We're not.
Well, David, that's true, and we're not, but they're never going to give it up because it's a divine command. After all, remember, chapter 9, verse 29 of the Quran says that they have a divine command to make us pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. Feel themselves subdued is what they are trying to do. They're trying to make sure that we bow to their will, because they have to make sure that we bow to their will. That's what Allah told them they have to do. And if we will not bow to their will, they will keep on trying to get us to bow to their will in whatever way that they can, by threats, by abuse, by calling us names, by trying to get us shut down on various social media sites. Whatever way that they can think of, they will employ, but they're never going to give it up. Because if you are of a mindset that 929 is marching orders for today, then you have to make the non-Muslims feel themselves subdued. And we do not feel ourselves subdued. Hence, they got to keep up the pressure. And if that doesn't work, step it up even more.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Robert, but I'm definitely not feeling subdued here. I'm not feeling subdued, ladies and gentlemen.
Imagine how much of that you're going to have to pay in jizya.
What are you talking about? I'm going to fund everyone. I'm going to fund everyone these guys don't like. All the guys who ended up, their plans backfiring and then they end up sending money. I'm going to find out everyone they don't like and make it rain money on these people. So, all right. Now, so where did we get to? Oh, I did want to play a video clip. So, wait.
Yes, sir.
Here we have Vivian here, and I've seen numerous requests like this. Vivian said, "Can David eat more verses?" Yeah, you have to wait on that. So, Vivian, the idea is
take requests.
Yeah, I am.
Why don't you eat 98.6? I've always liked that one.
That's the plan, but I don't want to just keep doing the same thing over and over because I'm an escalator. I'm an escalator. So again,
yes.
I'll just give everyone the outline. The next step is my origami lesson. Call it Koranogami, where the first video there, I'm going to show how to make an origami pig out of pages of the Quran that talk about the pig. All right, so it's nice and creative, and then that'll be out there, and then after that, then I will have an entire live stream, me and Sam Shamoon, where we take requests on which verses we're going to eat, and it's cool. I'll have Sam here. Sam will basically, you guys request it, and then Sam will explain why someone doesn't like that verse, why that's a reprehensible verse. That's when I'll have a nice plate of bacon and a 6-pack of beer, and I'll take a bite of bacon. I'll eat the verse that you don't like. I'll wash it down with some beer. All of that will, be mixed up in my tummy, and everything will be dedicated to Mohammad Hijab. And after we finish that, ladies and gentlemen, after that live stream, that will be the end of my warnings. Right? Because up to then, these are all warnings. After that, notice I haven't told other people to do this. I haven't invited other people to join in any of this. I just warned Mohammad Hijab, this is what I'm doing. So that will be the end of the warnings. And after the end of the warnings, that's when I will start. Oh no, there is one more after that. There is one more warning after that. I forget my own. I'm the best of plotters, but I forget my own plots. After that, but this one, people will actually be involved. I'm going to have 101 ways to destroy the Quran. That one I will actually make a video on and take requests of all the different ways you want to see me in one video destroy the Quran rapid fire. And after that, that will be the last thing that I do just by myself in a video. After that, I will be inviting people to contribute videos and so on. So you just have to sit there and wonder, because think about this. The Prophet Muhammad was ordered by Allah. Hey, these unbelievers are saying they're going to mock you if you don't stop. They're going to mock your God if you don't stop mocking their gods. Stop mocking their gods. And Muhammad said, okay, it hurts me to take an order from them. It hurts me to back down like this. But for the sake of my religion, I will do it. And then you've got Mohammad Hijab today. What? Huh? Who cares about my religion? All I care about is my pride. Oh, me strong, me never back down. So Mohammad Hijab is actually greater than Muhammad in his mind. This is amazing stuff. Muhammad himself backed down because Allah ordered him to. Muhammad Hijab, I will never back down. Me strong than you, me strong than Allah. This is interesting.
David,
stuff. Yeah.
Doesn't that make Mohammad Hijab a blasphemer and an apostate? And what What happens to blasphemers and apostates according to Sharia?
This guy's an apostate in like 20 different ways, right? Just from thinking he doesn't have to listen to the Quran, from thinking he doesn't have to obey Surah 6 verse 108, from condemning, mocking people's sacred symbols when Muhammad did that, so he's attacking his own prophet and his own God and Abu Bakr and all. It's just, this guy has no respect for anything but himself. It's amazing stuff, but it sure is fun to watch. Incredible. I have to say that, and it sure is good for me, ladies and gentlemen, because I have successfully managed to monetize Mohammad Hijab. All right. Now, where were we? Okay, so we had, I wanted to play this video clip because, we can share our thoughts on this, which started, and let me get the video pulled up, but this is Armin Navabi, ladies and gentlemen. So I ate a piece of the Quran as a warning to Mohammad Hijab. Then in a different live stream, the apostate prophet was annoyed that people were more upset with me taking a bite out of the Quran than they were with people saying he and his fellow ex-Muslims are going to be put to death. And so he started ripping up passages of the Quran saying, ripping up pages of the Quran saying, is this more important than my life? Is ripping this book more important than my life? And then after that, Armin Navabi made a video of himself doing this. This is a short video. So, pretty hardcore. He took a page of the Quran, spit on it, crumbled it up, threw it. What do you guys think about that? First, what are your thoughts on this? Because, Robert, there are lots of situations where I think, like, when Terry Jones was having his burn the Quran day, I actually debated him and said, hey, this is stupid. Don't do this. But with ex-Muslims who are actually under a death sentence for this stuff, even years ago, if an ex-Muslim was saying, I'm gonna burn the Quran, I'm like, hey, there's nothing I can say to someone who's under a death sentence simply for leaving this religion. But now it's where, the apostate prophet is just, guys, how do you not get this? And it seems that what I've gathered, I haven't been following it completely, but what they're saying is, we're going to do this. We're going to desecrate your Quran until everyone is desensitized to it. And so you don't start threatening people with death over this nonsense. And maybe you'll get to a point where you don't want to kill us for leaving your religion. So they're basically doing something similar to, they're drawing cartoons and things like that. Hey, get over this stuff. We're going to keep doing this stuff until you get over it and stop thinking that people need to die over this stuff.
Yeah, I would expect that some of these people that are doing this now, they would object to the hardline party of Denmark and Rasmus Paludan and to stop Islamization of Norway. And they would say, oh, they're right-wingers and so on. But they're doing the same thing that they did. And I've even seen people saying that you have to have the right people to do it. But I think that's ludicrous. The action is what's important here, not the actor. And in this case, they are doing exactly the same thing that needs to be done. They are showing that this reaction that Muslims are having, those who are threatening them are having, is completely disproportionate to the act, and that it is part of a free society to have free expression. You can't have free society if you have a protected class that is immune from criticism or mockery. And so if there is some group that it is illegal to criticize or illegal to mock, and you cannot take their holy book and chew it up and spit it out, then that group is immune from criticism, and that is the gateway to tyranny in any society. If you have a group that is above criticism, forbidden to criticize, then they can do whatever they want and nobody can say a word. So it is absolutely essential for the health of a free society and the continuation of a free society to have people doing this, whether they are so-called far right or whether they are leftist atheists or everything in between. The people who are doing this are standing up for a core principle of any free society, and a free society cannot be a free society unless this principle exists and is defended.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's my view. There's lots of situations where someone was just, standing on the street for no reason and just for the sake of annoying people was ripping something up or spitting on something. I'd say, grow up, or something like that. But my goodness, we're talking about people who are actually under a death sentence. And if the adherents of this ideology ever get power over them, they're openly admitting now, we're going to kill you. They're openly saying it. Yes, we're out doing our dawah every single day, winning converts. And if we ever really get the numbers, you're dead. And for some reason, these guys go, okay, you're saying you're going to kill me. Here, look, I'm spitting on your butt. And you have to die. You have to die. And so they're doing an awesome job getting people to reveal their true colors. Because again, when you're saying, hey, here's what I really think of your ideology, which calls for my death. This is how, the contempt I have for your book because of what it teaches you. Here's what I think about it. And then all the adherents of that book do is prove them right. Yes, now we're all going to kill you. Now you disgraced our book. Now we're not just going to kill you because you're an apostate. We're also going to kill you for, desecrating our book. And so now you're under multiple death sentences. Well, so
it's all about submission. Here again, in Islam, of course, Islam means submission. And the Muslim submits to Allah, and the non-Muslim submits to the Muslims. And the Muslims are the executors of Allah's wrath. Remember 9:14 and 15, where it says, fight them, and Allah will punish them by your hands. Mm-hmm. And so this is another responsibility that Muslims have, to bring the divine punishment, the punishment of Allah, to the unbelievers and to make them submit to their hegemony because they are unbelievers. So the submission has to be enforced. The Muslim submits to Allah, and the non-Muslim has to be forced to submit to the Muslims. And that's what is behind all of this, that we cannot draw Muhammad because it is a Sharia provision, and we have to obey Sharia not to depict Muhammad. And we certainly can't criticize Muhammad or draw Muhammad in a lampooning fashion or with a bomb in his turban, because that would be mocking Muhammad, and that is a death penalty offense. And we have to submit. It's all about obtaining or forcing our submission by means of intimidation and threats.
Mm-hmm. Now, we do have, let's see. We had some Muslims saying that you can't stop the Quran by destroying it because so many Muslims have memorized it.
Oh,
that one cracks me up.
What we're trying to do is destroy the Quran by eating a copy.
Yeah.
There are billions of Qurans. That's not the point.
Yeah. That's not what anyone here is trying to do. But I do think that's funny, just because now that we know that there are holes in the narrative. No, Muslims have not memorized the Quran, not the entire thing. Let me give you a quote from Abu Ubaid's Kitab Fada'il al-Quran. This is a quote from Ibn Umar. This is Ibn Umar, son of the rightly guided Caliph Umar, and Ibn Umar was also a companion of Muhammad. He once noticed that Muslims after the death of Muhammad were going around saying that they had memorized the entire Quran. Watch how he responds to them. Let none of you say, I have learned the whole of the Quran, for how does he know what the whole of it is when much of it has disappeared? Let him rather say, I have learned what remains thereof. So to all my Muslim friends out there, never, ever, ever say, Muslims have memorized the Quran. You say there are Muslims who have memorized what's left of the Quran after so much of it was lost. That is the correct position. Oh, but you never heard that before, right? Yeah, that's because your leaders are a bunch of liars who lie to you and say, perfect preservation, right down to the letter. My goodness, do some research, guys. Do some research. Proverbs here says, here's an interesting comment, Robert. Interested in
Yes, sir.
your thoughts on this. Proverbs says, as a Christian, no matter what, I will still try to be respectable. We have to show them what a true Christian should act like. So the idea here is a Christian would never disrespect someone else's position or book or be insulting or what? What are your thoughts on that?
David, this is an extraordinarily important point. And it touches on what we discussed before, that this is not really about the disrespect. If they said, you cannot draw David Wood, then we would have to draw David Wood. It's not about the fact that we are disrespecting their sacred figures, the fact in their sacred book, and so on. The real point is that they will kill us. The real point is that they are asserting hegemony over us and trying to force our submission by making us hesitate or stop doing these things that they don't like. And they happen to be acts of disrespect for their religion. That is unfortunate. Mm-hmm. I would love to be respectful and happy with everybody. The thing is, though, that I also want free society to survive. And I want the church to survive. And if everybody gets on his or her knees now and submits, then there's not going to be any future for the church or for free society. And so as an act of respect for the people in the church and as an act of respect for the people in the free society, I will stand up to the violent intimidation and make it end right here instead of encouraging it. Mm-hmm. It's not an act of charity to encourage violent intimidation that will ultimately overwhelm and enslave our children and our children's children. It's not being a good guy and being respectful and kind and being Christ-like to ensure that our children and our children's children live lives of the slavery of dimitude, the submission to Islamic law that they would be forced into if we keep encouraging and submitting to this intimidation. And so we have to stand up for it here. And we have to do the sacrificial act of actually appearing to be disrespectful to somebody else's sacred books and sacred texts. Of course, also unspoken in all this, David, is the fact that disrespect toward Christianity is built in. It's baked into Islam. It's not a bug, it's a feature. It's not an act of louts like Mohammad Hijab. It's in there for every Muslim. And of course, Christians nowadays, that's never spoken of, and we have people like the Pope going around denying it and claiming completely counterfactually that the Quran rejects every form of violence, and he's never said a word about the Quran denying the incarnation or the redemption or the resurrection, which is insulting to Christianity and to Christ himself. And he's never said a word about Jesus in the Quran saying, after me is going to come Muhammad, instead of saying it is finished. These things don't register as being insulting to Christianity because they've been around for 1400 years and we're used to them. But we Christians in Islamic societies have to endure insults to their religion all the time. I don't think they should react violently, of course. I'm not saying that they should do anything as a result, but it's just a reality. And then everybody gets all upset when some Christian insults Islam. But it cannot be emphasized enough that that is not the point. The point is to stop that intimidation before it victimizes us all and destroys our society.
Yeah, and Proverbs here, with your emphasis on respectability, I would encourage you to read the Bible. Read Matthew 23. Read what Jesus said to the scribes and Pharisees of his time when he's calling them fools, blind guides, whitewashed tombs full of all sorts of uncleanness. He insults them. He mocks them. That's a pattern in the Bible. And the pattern that you find in the Bible is, yes, there were all sorts of times when Jesus would be the nicest person in the world. If you were an outcast, if you were abused and oppressed by others, he was going to be the most loving person around. If you were an oppressor, oppressing people, especially a religious oppressor leading people astray, he was coming to pick a fight with you, right? He was going to shower you with insults, right? That's a fact. Again, that's a pattern we see throughout the Bible. So we have to say, according to the Bible, there's a time when you're just not respectable, right? There's a time when you put people in their place. There's a time when you insult. There's a time when you rebuke, even with mockery. We find that in the Bible. And again, the pattern that you find is this is most commonly associated with religious leaders who are leading other people astray and with oppressors. Now, if the pattern we find in Scripture is religious leaders who are leading other people astray and with oppressors, Old Testament or New Testament, same pattern. If those are the people who are on the receiving end of insults and mockery, well then, who's the ultimate religious leader who's leading people astray and the ultimate oppressor? Why, it's the same guy, Muhammad. So I would say, hey, if there's anyone that you could say, according to Scripture, we can go after this guy with insults, mockery, it's Muhammad. So
There's a big problem, David. A big problem in the church today and in the world as well, actually, that people have confused being charitable in a Christian sense, being loving in a Christian sense, with being nice. And all too many church leaders, all across all the sects and denominations and whatever else you want to name, there are leaders in every church who say that we have to love our Muslim brethren, and by that they don't mean we have to love our Muslim brethren. What they really mean is we have to submit to the intimidation of these jihadis who are trying to force it from us, and we have to refrain from saying anything about the persecution of Christians by Muslims in Africa and the Middle East. We have to refrain from saying anything about the ongoing second-class status of Christians in Egypt and Syria and other places where they were conquered centuries ago. We can't say anything about any of that because we have to be charitable. That is not what it means to be charitable. Mm-hmm. And it completely ignores what you were pointing out, that Jesus himself did not behave that way. Elijah the prophet in the Old Testament did not behave that way. He mocked the gods that he was up against when he was proving who had the real God. The record is very clear on this, but this is probably the foremost aspect of the biblical message that has been lost today and completely overlooked. And you have guys like Rick Warren going around and reaching out to groups with and individuals with ties to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. You have the Pope signing his ridiculous declaration with Ahmed al-Tayyib, the Grand Sheikh of Al-Azhar, saying that terrorism comes from economic and social factors and not from any teachings of any religion. And of course, he said in an earlier document that authentic Islam and the proper reading of the Quran reject every form of violence. There are so many examples of this from so many churchmen, and it's frankly insidious. It's dangerous. I'll give you one last example. That is Bishop Robert McManus of Worcester, Massachusetts. I was supposed to speak up there a few years ago at a Catholic conference, and McManus canceled me, which is true of many, many Catholic bishops. I was really on their list for a while. Now I just don't get invited at all. But that's all right. The real thing about McManus that was disturbing was that he said that the problem is that I was going to come in and talk about the persecution of Christians in Nigeria and elsewhere by Islamists, and that would harm the dialogue that he was having with the Muslims in the Worcester, Massachusetts area. Wow. So in other words, in order to maintain his dialogue, which hasn't accomplished a single thing, hasn't saved one Christian from persecution, hasn't converted one Muslim to Christianity, hasn't saved one church from being burned or appropriated as a mosque, in order to save this totally illusory dialogue, he's going to stop talking about the persecution of Christians. And so the church, instead of standing up for the brethren who are persecuted, stands down and submits. And that's what this desecration and the burning of the Quran and all these other things are designed, and the Draw Muhammad contest that we had, that's what it's all designed to prevent. So that a society in which the church can flourish and in which all free people of every faith can flourish can still be preserved. If we start kowtowing to violent intimidation, those things are going to be obliterated.
Yeah, and on that issue, I mean, this was a while back, but I actually had a video banned by YouTube as hate speech that was simply reporting statistics on persecution of Christians. And the top 10 countries that were basically the worst countries to be a Christian in because of the levels of persecution there. And all I did was read statistics off, and YouTube banned that as hate speech. But similar idea, you can't say this kind of thing because it's going to hurt and offend the wrong people. But what you were just pointing out right there, hey, Robert, you're going to talk about persecuted Nigerians and so on, and that's going to injure my relationship with these guys. So we have to keep quiet about that. That is, it's similar to the situation with hijab in that people like Mohammad Hijab and the terrorists and the oppressors and the radical ones who want to take over and execute people, they use the nice Muslims that we want to get along with to basically shield their activities from criticism, right? So in other words, this is the message that we get from Islam. Hey, these guys are, gang raping little girls, and these guys are blowing you up, and these guys are, saying abusive things about your wife, and these guys are saying they're gonna kill you as soon as they take over. But you have your nice Muslim friends, and you don't want to hurt your relationship with those people, do you? Therefore, turn a blind eye towards everything these people are doing. Even if they're raping your daughters, even if they're heaping abuse on your wife, even if they're saying they're going to kill you, you don't want to hurt your relationship with those guys over there, do you? No, you don't want to do that. Yep. You don't want to upset them. And so, guys, you can't go on like this forever, letting people, violent oppressors get away with it because you don't want to hurt people's feelings. There has to come a point. You're free to explain it. You're free to say, hey, look, my nice Muslim friend who would never hurt anyone in your entire life, I really like you. I hope that we can continue having a friendly relationship. However, I cannot ignore that person. Either you expose him and call him out, or I'm going to. But when I do it, don't come complaining to me that I'm hurting your feelings, right? And so,
well, David, there are some Islamic groups in the United States that have this kind of thing down to a science.
Oh yeah.
And
it's part of the plot. It's part of the plot, right? That's why I'm pointing it out. This is a means of controlling you people, right? Notice everything Robert and I have been saying this evening. It's all about control and how they can control you. Well, guess what? The people who want to control you use the peaceful, nice Muslims that you're familiar with as a weapon against you to silence you. Notice they will use anything to keep you silent about what's going on and what Islam teaches. And guess what? They're pawns. They're pawns in part of this scheme.
Yep. It's a consciously worked out strategy, and I've encountered it many times. I spoke at Stanford University a few years back, and there were Muslim groups on campus who said that they feared for their safety because I was coming. Mm-hmm. Now, this, of course, is ridiculous because I know, I don't call for any violence, justify any violence, approve of any violence. All I do is talk about how Islamic jihadis use the teachings of Islam to justify violence and to make recruits among peaceful Muslims. But they knew that if they played the victim and said they were afraid, that they could get the thing shut down. In the same way, I spoke at a county Republican club up in New England last year. And there was a Muslim family in the area that the local press found, and they said, yes, we're afraid because Spencer's coming to speak. And I thought, this is so ludicrous, but it works very well. It's very cleverly done because really, if they are peaceful, as I'm sure they are, then they ought to have no problem with me calling out the violent ones. Mm-hmm. They ought to object to the violent ones just as much as I do. And everybody who is objecting to the talk ought to object to the violent ones. But instead, they see this nice family who says they're afraid, and they think, well, we can't have you be afraid. We don't want you to be threatened, and so we'll ban this guy. And they've done it all over the country to many people. And, of course, it's not really about the peaceful, nice Muslim family in New England. It's about the jihadis who are cutting off the heads. But they can't be spoken about because it would somehow impinge upon these peaceful Muslims. There is absolutely no connection. Any connection that is really made is made by those who are trying to shut down this kind of conversation. Because, neither you nor I nor anybody else that we work with ever says, all Muslims are terrorists. But I constantly hear that I say it from people who hate what I'm trying to do. And they are actually enabling the jihad by shutting down discussion of the actual terrorists.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Shout out here to an ex-Muslim. Says, hi, David. I left Islam because of you and Sam. You're doing an amazing job. Thank you, and keep it up. Keep serving our Lord and Savior. We will. I look forward to hearing from many, many more. So, ladies and gentlemen, as far as you Christians who think, you shouldn't hurt people's feelings. What we've been pointing out is your good intentions and the nice Muslims around you have both been weaponized by people who want to subjugate you. And
exactly,
you are not commanded to be stupid and fall for this, right? You're not commanded to be stupid and to fall for this and to let future generations be subjugated because you are too stupid to see what's going on, right? It's part of their playbook. It's part of their means of controlling you. Don't fall for this stuff. All right, Robert. Well, we've been going for a while. We started by mentioning the Charlie Hebdo, and then we went kind of back to the beginning. Went through Salman Rushdie and the Danish cartoons and South Park and you and Molly Norris, and then through Sweden, Norway, me eating the Quran,
David,
desecrate
none
the
of
Quran
this would have
hashtag.
happened.
Yeah.
Excuse me, but I got to say, none of that would have happened if they hadn't threatened to kill people because of it.
Yep.
And that's what they never seem to figure out, these jihadis. They don't seem to understand that they themselves are making these events happen. They themselves are making people think it's important. I have to desecrate the Quran or draw Muhammad now. If they didn't say anything, if they reacted the way Christians do when you put a crucifix in a jar of urine or something, they complain, but they don't kill anybody, then these things would die out. Nobody would do it.
Yep. And yet I was talking to Harris Sultan last night, and I was telling him, I said, years ago when I had a plan in my head, I would keep it to myself, but I've gotten to the point where I could just tell Mohammad Hijab what he's going to do and what I'm going to do in response, and then what he's going to do, because the people they seem to have one method, right? It's I heap abuse and threats on you. Oh, that's not working. Let me heap more abuse and threats on you.
Yeah.
And so and they don't get it, right? You've seen it with the Charlie Hebdo and all these things. People are no longer backing down in fear. Now they're starting to realize, wait a minute, you guys are saying that you're gonna slaughter these apostates. You are saying that you can have sex with 9-year-old girls. You are saying all this horrible, creepy stuff. Well, guess what? No, we're not objecting anymore. And if you get violent over this stuff, well, we're gonna keep supporting more. And so, guys, this is going in the opposite direction from what you're intending. And so, if you're a Mohammad Hijab fan right now, and you're thinking, I can't believe that you've got these people ripping up the Quran and eating the Quran and spitting on the Quran and drawing cartoons of of Muhammad. I can't believe this. What do we need to do? Let's get more violent. Let's heap more abuse on them. That'll work. Guys, you need.
They only got the one tool in their box.
Yeah. It's pretty sad. All right, so I guess that brings us up to Charlie Hebdo. You think anything's gonna happen as a result of the republication of cartoons, or you think we've gotten to a point where there's not going to be much of a backlash?
I think because it's Charlie Hebdo, something might happen. If it were anybody else, maybe nothing would happen at this point. But I think there are going to be some jihadis out there who think it's a point of pride because they hit Charlie Hebdo before, and now the infidels are not submitting again, and they have to be once again shown they must submit. And so I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's no attempt, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was in this case.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, yeah, a lot of them are now used to the idea of people, making cartoons and criticizing Mohammad and so on. But because it's this group, because it's Charlie Hebdo, you might have another attempt. So hopefully, and I'm assuming the cartoonists and editors and all that stuff are taking some decent security precautions.
They weren't ready at all in 2015. They probably should have been, but probably they themselves were not really aware of the full implications of what they were doing. I think that became clear when they denounced us after the Garland attack. They really don't know anything about Islam, and they don't know what they're dealing with. So they really didn't think anything was going to happen. But now they ought to know, and I hope they're prepared.
Yep. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you are now fully up to date on the entire history of criticizing and mocking Muhammad and the Quran as a tool to avoid being subjugated by an ideology that wants to control you and take away your rights. So you're up to date. Anything that, things might happen next week. In fact, I know things are going to happen next week because things are going to happen next week on my channel. The Desecrate the Quran hashtag on Twitter has taken off. People have been posting some stuff. In fact, one young lady who had left Islam posted a video of her ripping up the Quran, and she had her channel taken down. So people were able to successfully get YouTube to take her channel down. Now, you'd have to wonder why, in the name of common sense, it should be against the rules or the law on YouTube to tear up a book, especially an ex-Muslim who was under a death sentence from her former religion. But, yep, she got her channel taken down. Hopefully,
David, if she had ripped a Bible up, her channel would still be there. And it's not because YouTube respects Islam. It's because YouTube has already submitted. They know they don't want to get killed. And so they have already decided to bend the knee to Sharia in this regard and to make sure that people can't do this. I mean, I hope you don't get taken down yourself, but it's a bad trend, what we see coming lately with YouTube and all the social media giants. They all seem to be absolutely ready to be Sharia compliant.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of time, but not worried about that. I will adapt. Whatever they do, I will adapt, ladies and gentlemen, because that's what happens. See, I keep pointing this out to people. The Muhammad Hijabs of the world, the Ali Dawahs, they keep thinking, hey, if we just keep heaping abuse on these guys, they'll eventually back down. You don't realize everyone who could be pushed around like that, ladies and gentlemen, is already gone, right? They're doing other things. What you're down to is people who will never back down, and you could saw our heads off and we're not going to back down. And so you need to give up on the intimidation tactic. And check this out. Think for Yourself says, these guys getting paid to spew this hateful rhetoric. Well, he actually said hatful rhetoric. So these guys getting paid to spew this hatful rhetoric. Think for yourself. Do I look like someone who's getting paid here? Do I look like someone who's getting paid? I'm just trying to figure this one out, because I don't know why you'd say that about me. And then Zero Animosity apparently hasn't been following anything that's going on, because he says, bye-bye your Patreon. I guess he's been following Mohammad Hijab's video, and Anan Rashid and Ali Dawah and Fareed, who are all campaigning for Patreon to get rid of me. Yes. Zero animosity. Were you not following anything that's been going on? These guys have gotten me literally hundreds of new patrons on Patreon. And that's why I'm flashing cash here, right? These guys, you don't realize I've monetized these guys. These guys work for me, doing what I want them to do in destroying their ideology. And even though they're working for me, they're paying me to work for me. And they don't realize it because they don't realize Allah's not the best of planners. I'm the best of planners. They don't know it. They don't know it, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Robert, any final thoughts before we take off?
Oh, my goodness. I wish that people would stop submitting and recognize the multifaceted ways in which Islamic supremacists are trying to get you to submit. And so many people fall for it because they think it's being charitable or being nice. Cut it out. Get off your knees. Stand up. If we do not, then our children are going to be on their knees. And I don't want that. Nobody should want that.
That is correct. And just thank you, everyone, for joining us. The links to Robert's website, that's the main resource you'll want from Robert, because that is the best place on the planet to stay up to date every day on what's going on in the world of jihad. So go to Jihad Watch. The link's in the description box. I also have a link because several of you have asked if Robert has a YouTube channel. Yes, there's a link to Robert's YouTube channel in the description box. And also to the greatest book there is on the topic of jihad, Robert's book, The History of Jihad. A link to that book on Amazon is also in the description box. So you'll definitely want to subscribe to the channel. Check out the website if you're not already on there. If you're following my stuff and you haven't been following Jihad Watch, I don't know where you've been all these years, but definitely get the book History of Jihad. And I pointed out before, there's a lot of information in there. At the very least, get the book and learn the first chapter well. Learn that chapter well. Other than that, so in order of importance, I would say first chapter most important, then the second chapter or the last chapter, because you have the rest of the first generation of Muslims, and then you have current events. But
David, all the other chapters, chapter 3 through 9, that's all the material that hardly anybody knows.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying in terms of significance, as far as being able to say Muhammad taught this and his companions taught that, and understanding the world today. Those things I think would be most important to most people, but you're right. It wasn't until, because that was most of that, those chapters 3 through 9, most of that was new information to me. And I've been talking about this and debating this for years, and you don't really get it. Even after all these years of studying the Muslim sources, you don't really get jihad until you read through that entire book and you finally get it. This is relentless, and each generation just keeps forgetting what happened right before it. And people just do not understand that this has been coming at you for 14 centuries relentlessly. The only time it stops is when it has been stopped. And
when people stood up and wouldn't take it.
Mm-hmm. And so
that's what we got to figure out how to do to nowadays.
Yep. And I'm feeling pretty good. I think we're doing it. I think we're doing it.
These are interesting times.
Oh, fun times. All right. I'll have a video out tomorrow, maybe 2 videos. I'm not sure if I'm going live tomorrow night, ladies and gentlemen, but just check out the channel and you'll either find videos or you'll find out when I'm live streaming. So if you haven't clicked the bell, be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get notifications. We got some cool stuff coming up for you and some cool guests. Thanks, Robert, for joining me, and catch you all next time.
Thank you, David. Mm-hmm.